The Galactic Military Academy floated in the darkness of space like a metal city. It was built on Station Varath 7, a place where young soldiers from hundreds of different worlds came to learn how to fight. The station was old. It had been training warriors for 300 years. In that time, it had seen every kind of creature walk through its doors. Commander Zorath sat in his office and looked at his computer screen. He was a Kelvaxi, which meant he was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin covered in shiny scales that changed color when light hit them. His people were known for being strong and proud. They did not think much of weaker species. Today was assessment day. New cadets had arrived from all corners of the galaxy, and it was his job to sort them. Some would become warriors. Others would become support staff. The weak ones would fix machines and clean floors. The strong ones would learn to fight. His assistant stood beside him. Her name was Tira, and she was a fennec. Her species looked like tall foxes that walked on 2 legs. She was nervous around Zorath because he was her superior officer, but she was good at her job. Zorath scrolled through the files. He saw Tharaki cadets, massive creatures with armor-plated skin. He saw Elvari cadets, tall beings covered in feathers who could see in complete darkness. He saw Kelvaxi cadets from his own world. All of them received high ratings. All of them would become fighters. Then he reached a different file. Cadet Molly Grant. He read out loud. Planet of origin, Earth. Age, 22 standard cycles. He stopped and made a sound of disappointment. A human, Tira said quietly. Yes, another human. Zorath pulled up more information. Physical classification. Fragile. Muscle density. Below average. Bone structure. Hollow compared to standard military species. Natural weapons. None. Threat assessment. Low. Tira looked at the screen. Humans are still quite new to the Academy, Commander. Only 12 have ever graduated. And none of them did anything worth remembering, Zorath replied. Their planet has weak gravity. Their bodies are soft. They break easily and heal slowly. Why the Galactic Union keeps sending them here, I will never understand. He pressed a button and made his decision. Auxiliary track. Engineering support. She can learn to fix engines and stay out of the way of real soldiers. The decision was final. The computer updated her file automatically. At that same moment, Molly Grant was standing in the processing hall on the other side of the station. The hall was enormous, big enough to hold 1,000 beings at once. Right now, it held about 200 new cadets, and Molly was the smallest person in the room. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple braid that kept it out of her face. Her eyes were brown and calm. She wore the standard gray uniform that all new cadets received, and she stood with her hands behind her back, waiting. Around her, aliens of every shape and size talked and moved and made noise. A Tharaki cadet stood next to her. He was almost 8 feet tall and looked like a rhinoceros that had learned to walk upright. His skin was thick plates of natural armor, gray and rough like stone. When he breathed, it sounded like wind moving through a cave. Molly's wrist display made a small beeping sound. Her classification had arrived. She lifted her arm and read the words on the screen. Auxiliary track. Support services. Low combat priority. She read it twice to make sure she understood. Then she lowered her arm and said nothing. The Tharaki beside her had been watching. He leaned down to look at her screen, and when he saw what it said, he made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. It was laughter. The human gets sent to work with the cleaning machines, he said. His voice was like rocks grinding together. How perfect, how fitting. Other cadets nearby turned to look. Some of them made similar sounds of amusement. A human trying to become a soldier was funny to them. It was like watching a small animal try to fight a storm. Molly looked up at the Tharaki. Her face showed no anger and no shame. "What track did you receive?" she asked him. The Tharaki stood up straighter, proud. "Combat Alpha, the highest level, where true warriors belong." "Congratulations," Molly said. She meant it. There was no sarcasm in her voice. The Tharaki seemed confused by her response. He had expected her to be upset or embarrassed. Instead, she simply put her display away and began walking toward the auxiliary orientation hall. Her footsteps were light and quiet on the metal floor, compared to the heavy stomping of the Tharaki and the clicking of the insect-like Vreen and the scratching of the stone-bodied golem cadets. She made almost no sound at all. She walked past warriors who could crush her with one hand. She walked past beings with claws and fangs and armor built into their bodies. She walked past creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space or swim through pools of acid. And she kept her head up the entire time. The auxiliary orientation hall was smaller than the main processing area. It was where the support cadets gathered. The beings here were different from the ones in Combat Alpha. They were small, Fennecs with quick hands good for detailed repair work. There were slow-moving Polari, whose many eyes could spot tiny problems in complex machines. There were other humans too, 3 of them, all looking disappointed with their classifications. One of them, a young man named Kevin Park, looked up when Molly entered. He had been crying, though he tried to hide it. "They put you in auxiliary too?" he asked. Molly nodded and sat down beside him. "It's not fair," Kevin said. "I trained for 2 years on Earth. I was top of my class in combat simulations. But they took one look at my species and decided I was worthless." "They decided we were not suited for combat," Molly said. "That is different from worthless." "Is it?" Molly thought about the question. She thought about the Tharaki, who had laughed at her. She thought about Commander Zorith, who had never even met her, but had already decided what she could and could not do. She thought about the 12 humans who had graduated from this academy, all of them forgotten. None of them remembered for anything special. "No," she finally said. "I suppose it is not." Kevin wiped his eyes. "So what do we do?" Molly looked around the orientation hall. She looked at the other support cadets, the small ones and the weak ones and the ones who did not fit the Academy's idea of a warrior. Then she looked at the door that led to the rest of the station, to the training facilities and the combat arenas and the proving grounds where real soldiers were made. "We do our jobs," she said, "and we wait for a chance to show them they were wrong." Kevin did not look convinced. But Molly was not speaking to convince him. She was speaking to remind herself. Somewhere on this station, there would be an opportunity. A test, a trial, something that would let her prove that the assessment was just a starting point, not an ending. She just had to find it. News traveled fast on Station Vera 7. Within 2 days of Molly registering for the gravity trial, every cadet in the academy knew about it. The reaction was not kind. In the cafeteria, beings from a dozen worlds whispered and pointed at her. A group of Calvaxi officers laughed openly when she walked past their table. A Vreen cadet, whose species resembled giant praying mantises, clicked her mandibles in what Molly had learned was mockery. "The human thinks she can survive the gravity chamber," the Vreen said to her companions. "Perhaps she will last 10 seconds before her soft bones turn to powder." Molly took her tray of food and sat alone at an empty table. She ate her meal without looking up. The whispers and laughter did not bother her. Words were just sounds. They could not hurt her unless she let them. The betting pools opened on the 3rd day. Cadets at the academy often wagered on evaluation trials. It was technically against the rules, but no one enforced those rules. The pools were run by a clever Fennec named Turek, who had connections throughout the station. Molly found out her odds from Kevin Park, who had recovered from his leg injuries and returned to training. "They're giving you 200 to 1. he told her in a quiet voice. That means if someone bets 1 credit on you, they win 200 if you succeed. That is very bad odds, Molly observed. It's insulting odds. They're basically saying you have no chance at all. Kevin hesitated. Molly, I've heard stories about the gravity chamber. People have died in there. A Fennec cadet last year pushed too hard and his lungs collapsed. He couldn't breathe. They barely saved him. I know. Mentor Savick told me. Then why are you doing this? Molly looked at her friend. Kevin was a good person. He worked hard and followed orders and did everything the Academy asked of him. But he had accepted his classification. He had stopped fighting against what others decided he should be. Because someone has to, she said. The next day, Molly was training in the facility when a shadow fell over her. She looked up and saw Gorath, the Tharaki, who had laughed at her on the first day. He was even bigger up close. His armor-plated skin was the color of dark stone, and his small eyes were set deep in a face that looked like it had been carved by ancient hands. When he breathed, she could feel the air move. Human, he said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Molly stood up. She barely reached his chest. Cadet Gorath, you know my name? I know all the combat alpha cadets. It is useful information. Gorath made a sound that might have been surprise. You study us? I study everything. The Tharaki was quiet for a moment. Other cadets in the facility had stopped their training to watch. A human and a Tharaki standing face to face was an unusual sight. I heard you registered for the gravity trial, Gorath finally said. I did. Why? It was the same question everyone kept asking. Molly was getting tired of answering it. Why does it matter to you? She asked instead. Gorath shifted his weight. For such a massive creature, he suddenly seemed uncomfortable. Because you helped me, he said quietly. In navigation studies. 3 weeks ago, I was struggling with the stellar cartography equations. You saw me making mistakes, and you corrected them. You did not have to do that. Molly remembered. It had been a small thing. She had noticed him entering wrong coordinates and had simply pointed out the error. It had taken 10 seconds. You were going to fail the assignment, she said. It seemed wasteful to let that happen when the fix was simple. Most humans would not help someone who mocked them. Molly shrugged. You laughed at my classification. You did not try to hurt me or insult my family or suggest that my species should not exist. In my experience, that is relatively polite behavior. Gorath made that rumbling sound again. This time, Molly recognized it as laughter. Real laughter, not mockery. You are strange, human. Very strange. He paused. The gravity trial is dangerous. You understand this, yes? It is not like other tests. The gravity does not stop when you fall. It keeps increasing until someone outside the chamber ends it. If no one is paying attention, if the safety systems fail, you could be crushed. I understand. Cadets have broken bones in that chamber. Cracked ribs. Ruptured blood vessels in their eyes. A Golem cadet 3 years ago had his stone shell shattered into 50 pieces. It took him 2 years to regrow it. I understand, Molly repeated. Gorath leaned down, bringing his massive face closer to hers. Then understand this also. The trial goes to 5 times standard gravity. My people can survive 4 times standard gravity with difficulty. No human body is designed to handle more than 3. You will fall, and when you fall, you will be hurt. Badly hurt. Perhaps killed. Molly met his small, deep-set eyes without flinching. Then I will fall, she said. But I will fall knowing that I tried. That is better than never trying at all. Gorath stared at her for a long moment. Then he straightened up and nodded slowly. You have courage, human. Foolish courage, perhaps. But courage nonetheless. He turned to leave, then stopped. "If you survive the trial, I will buy you a drink in the recreation center. It is a Tharaki tradition to honor those who face death and live. And if I don't survive?" Gareth's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "Then I will drink alone and remember you as the bravest fool I ever met." He walked away, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. The other cadets in the facility slowly returned to their training, but Molly noticed that some of them were looking at her differently now. Not with mockery, but with something that might have been curiosity. The next 5 weeks were the hardest of Molly's life. She trained every moment she was not in class or sleeping. She ran in the morning. She did strength exercises at midday. She practiced breathing techniques at night, learning to control her heart rate and oxygen intake in ways that most humans never needed to learn. She studied the gravity chamber itself, reading every report and watching every recording of past trials that she could find. She learned how the gravity increased, how quickly it changed, what it felt like at each level. She memorized the experiences of cadets who had succeeded and cadets who had failed. She learned that the key was not strength. The GOM cadets were the strongest beings in the academy, made of living rock, and even they failed the gravity trial more often than not. Strength alone could not defeat gravity. The key was efficiency. It was using energy wisely. It was knowing which muscles to engage and which to relax. It was controlling breathing and heart rate and blood flow. It was turning the body into a machine designed for one purpose: staying upright. Molly practiced standing. Just standing. She would stand in her quarters for hours, focusing on her posture, on the distribution of her weight, on the alignment of her spine. She would stand until her legs shook and her back ached, and sweat ran down her face. Then she would rest for 5 minutes and stand again. The other auxiliary cadets thought she had gone mad. Kevin Park tried to talk her out of the trial twice more before giving up. Even Mentor Savick stopped trying to discourage her and simply wished her luck each time he saw her. The night before the trial, Molly sat alone in her quarters and looked at her hands. They were small hands, human hands, soft compared to the claws and armored fists of the beings she would be competing against, but they were her hands. And tomorrow, she would use them to push herself off the floor of the gravity chamber, over and over again, until she could not push anymore. She closed her eyes and imagined success. She imagined standing in 5 times gravity while the entire academy watched. She imagined Commander Zareth's face when he realized his assessment had been wrong. Then she opened her eyes and went to sleep. Tomorrow, she would find out what she was truly made of. 3 weeks passed on Station Verith 7. And Molly Grant learned what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy built for stronger species. The Galactic Academy operated at 1.4 times Earth gravity. This meant that everything weighed more than it should. Walking felt like moving through thick water. Climbing stairs felt like climbing mountains. Even breathing was harder because her lungs had to work against the extra pressure pushing down on her chest. The other humans in the auxiliary program struggled badly. Kevin Park developed stress fractures in his legs during the 2nd week. He spent 5 days in the medical bay. A woman named Lisa Wong requested medical discharge after her heart began showing signs of strain. She was sent back to Earth on a transport ship, her military career over before it truly began. By the end of the 3rd week, only 4 humans remained in the entire academy. 2 were in auxiliary support with Molly. 2 others were attempting the combat beta track, which was 1 level below combat alpha. Molly refused to break. Every morning, she woke 1 hour before the official wake-up call. While other cadets slept, she ran. The maintenance corridors of the station were long and empty at that hour. They twisted through the station like metal veins, connecting every section. Most cadets never saw them. They were meant for repair workers and cleaning machines. Molly ran them every day. She started with 1 kilometer. By the end of the third week, she was running 5. Her body screamed at her. Her muscles burned. Her joints ached. But she did not stop. She had read about how bones grow stronger under stress. She had read about how muscles adapt to new conditions. Earth athletes had known these things for centuries. She would use that knowledge now. She also changed what she ate. The academy cafeteria served food for dozens of species, and she studied each option carefully. She chose meals high in calcium and protein. She ate bitter Calvaxi root vegetables that were supposed to increase bone density. She drank supplements designed for species recovering from low-gravity environments. The food tasted terrible. She ate it anyway. Her instructor in the auxiliary program was an Elvari named Mentor Savick. He was tall and thin, covered in soft gray feathers that rippled when he moved. His eyes were large and golden, designed to see in darkness. He taught engineering and maintenance, and he was patient with his students in a way that other instructors were not. One evening, after the other cadets had left the classroom, Savick called Molly to his desk. "You are not like the other auxiliary cadets," he said. His voice was soft, like wind through leaves. Molly stood at attention. "Sir, I have watched you these past weeks. You work harder than anyone in this program. Harder than many in Combat Alpha, truthfully. You run every morning. You study every night. You have memorized the entire station layout." He tilted his feathered head. "Why?" Molly considered her answer carefully. "Because my classification was assigned, sir. It was not earned. I would like the chance to earn something different." Savick's feathers rose slightly. This was curiosity in his species. "There are evaluation trials in 6 weeks," he said. "All cadets may ask to be tested for combat readiness. It is a rule that exists for exactly this situation. However, I must warn you. The tests are designed for beings with natural advantages that humans do not have." "What kind of advantages?" "Strength, speed, multiple limbs, natural armor, the ability to survive in harsh conditions." Savick paused. "There is a reason no human has ever passed the combat evaluation trials." "What are the trials?" Savick explained them. There was the endurance run, which took place in an environment with shifting gravity and temperature. There was the combat simulation, where cadets faced holographic enemies designed to test reaction speed. There was the strength assessment, which measured raw physical power. And there was the gravity chamber. "Tell me about that one," Molly said. Savick's feathers flattened against his body. This was concern. "The gravity chamber is the hardest test. It is a room where the artificial gravity can be increased far beyond normal levels. Cadets enter and must remain standing as the gravity rises. It starts at standard level and increases slowly until the cadet cannot continue. What is the failure point for most cadets?" "The average Combat Alpha candidate falls at 3.2 times standard gravity. Some Tharaki have reached 4. The Academy record is 4.4, set by a Tharaki who later became an admiral. And humans?" Savick was quiet for a moment. "No human has ever attempted the gravity trial. It is believed that humans lose consciousness at approximately 3 times standard gravity. Attempting to go higher would be extremely dangerous." Molly nodded slowly. She was thinking. Her brain was working through numbers and possibilities like a computer solving a problem. "The gravity on Earth is lower than standard galactic gravity," she said. "That is true. But humans have lived in many different gravity conditions. We have sent people to space where there is no gravity. We have trained people in high-gravity environments on Earth using spinning machines. We adapt. Adaptation takes time," Savick replied. "More time than 6 weeks. Maybe, maybe not." Savick studied her with his large golden eyes. "You are considering attempting the gravity trial." It was not a question, so Molly did not answer it. Instead, she asked a question of her own. What happens if an auxiliary cadet passes a combat evaluation trial? They are reclassified. Their status changes from support to combat. It has happened before, though rarely. A Fennec did it 2 years ago. She is now serving on a battlecruiser. Molly felt something warm spread through her chest. It might have been hope. It might have been determination. It might have been the start of a plan. Thank you for the information, Mentor Savick. She turned to leave, but Savick's voice stopped her. Cadet Grant, I must ask you something. She turned back. Why do this? You could have a good career in engineering support. It is honest work. Important work. You would be safe. You would be comfortable. He paused. Why risk humiliation? Why risk injury? Why push yourself to break against a test designed for species 10 times stronger than your own? Molly thought about the question. She thought about Kevin Park crying in the orientation hall. She thought about Lisa Wang being sent home. She thought about the Tharaki, who had laughed at her classification. She thought about Commander Zorath, who had decided her future without ever looking at her face. Because comfortable is not why I left Earth, she said. I did not travel across the galaxy to fix engines and stay out of the way. I came here to become something more than what I was. And I cannot do that if I accept what other people think I should be. Savick was quiet for a long time. Then his feathers rose again, and this time Molly thought he might be smiling, if his species could smile. Then I wish you luck, Cadet Grant. You will need it. Molly nodded and walked out of the classroom. The corridor outside was busy with cadets moving between classes. Tharaki stomped past her. Calvaxi strode by on their long legs. Phoenix darted between larger beings, quick and nervous. None of them looked at her. She was too small to notice, too weak to matter. That would change. She walked to the training facility and found an empty corner where no one would bother her. Then she dropped to the floor and began doing push-ups. Not regular push-ups, but a modified form she had developed herself. Each one was slow and controlled, designed to build strength in muscles that humans rarely used. 1, 2, 3. She counted each one in her head and imagined the gravity chamber. She imagined standing in that room while the weight of the world pressed down on her. She imagined all the aliens watching, waiting for her to fall. 2021. 20-2. She would not fall. She would not break. She would not give them the satisfaction of being right about her. 50. 51. 50-2. 6 weeks. That was all the time she had. 6 weeks to prepare her body for something no human had ever done. It was not enough time. She knew that. Savick had told her that. Every piece of logic told her that. But Molly Grant had never been very good at listening to logic. 70-5. 70-6. She kept counting until her arms gave out. Then she rested for 1 minute and started again. The gravity trial chamber was located in the deepest part of Station Vareth 7, far from the living quarters and classrooms. This was for safety reasons. The gravity generators in the chamber were powerful enough to tear apart normal structures. The walls were reinforced with materials strong enough to survive starship impacts. Molly walked through the corridors toward the chamber, and she was not alone. Word of her trial had spread throughout the academy. Cadets from every program and every species filled the hallways, all of them heading to the observation galleries to watch. Some of them wished her luck as she passed. A few Phoenix gave her small nods of respect. A group of Elvari cadets pressed their feathered hands together in what Molly had learned was a blessing for those facing danger. Most of them just stared. They had never seen a human attempt a gravity trial before. They wanted to see what would happen. Commander Zorath was waiting outside the chamber entrance. He stood with his forearms folded across his chest, his scales shimmering under the artificial lights. Beside him was Tira, his Fennec assistant, holding a datapad with Molly's vital information displayed on the screen. Zorath looked down at her with an expression that was hard to read. "Cadet Grant," he said, "you understand that you may still withdraw. There is no shame in recognizing one's limitations. With respect, Commander, I believe I will recognize my limitations inside the chamber, not outside of it." Zorath's secondary eyes narrowed. "Your stubbornness is noted. Proceed." The door to the chamber slid open, and Molly stepped inside. The room was circular and completely bare. The floor was polished metal, smooth as glass. The walls curved upward to meet a domed ceiling covered in gravity generation panels. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to brace against. Success meant standing on your own strength alone. Above her, the observation galleries were packed with beings. Hundreds of faces looked down at her through reinforced glass. She saw Thoraki and Kalvaxi and Ovari and Fennec and dozens of other species she did not recognize. She saw Kevin Park pressing his face against the glass, his expression worried. She saw Mentor Savick standing calmly with his feathered arms at his sides. She saw Garth, the Thoraki who had warned her about the danger. He was watching without expression, but when their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. The door closed behind her, and she was alone in the chamber. Commander Zorath's voice came through speakers in the ceiling. "Cadet Grant, the gravity trial will now begin. The chamber is currently set at standard gravity. Every 30 seconds, the gravity will increase by 0.2 standard units. You may end the trial at any time by speaking the word yield. Do you understand these rules?" Molly stood straight, her feet shoulder-width apart, her arms at her sides. "I understand, Commander." "Then begin." For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was quiet. Molly could hear her own heartbeat. Steady and strong. Then the gravity increased. The first increment was barely noticeable. It felt like someone had placed a light hand on her shoulders. She adjusted her stance slightly and waited. The second increment was like wearing a heavy coat. Her body felt heavier, but she had trained for this. She controlled her breathing, keeping it slow and regular. The third increment was where real effort began. At 1.6 times standard gravity, every movement required thought. Her arms hung at her sides like weights. Her spine compressed slightly. She focused on keeping her posture perfect. In the observation gallery, the whispers began. "She's still standing," someone said. "Wait until 2.0. That's when humans start to struggle." At 2 times standard gravity, Molly felt the pressure like a physical force pushing down on every part of her body. Her heart worked harder to pump blood against the increased resistance. Her lungs expanded with effort. Sweat began to form on her forehead, but she did not fall. 2.2, 2.4, 2.6. The whispers in the gallery had stopped. The crowd was silent now, watching with increasing surprise as the small human remained standing long past the point where most expected her to collapse. At 2.8 times standard gravity, Molly's legs began to shake. The muscles in her thighs were screaming. Her calves felt like they were on fire. Every fiber of her body wanted to drop to the floor and rest. She did not drop. 3 times standard gravity. This was the point where humans were supposed to lose consciousness. The medical textbooks said so. The Academy records said so. Every piece of scientific knowledge said that a human body could not function at 3 times standard gravity. Molly's vision narrowed. Black spots appeared at the edges of her sight. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. Blood was having trouble reaching her brain. She adjusted her stance, lowering her center of gravity. She controlled her breathing, taking shorter breaths more frequently. She focused her mind on a single point on the floor in front of her. She stayed standing. In the control booth, Commander Zorath leaned forward. His primary eyes had widened. "This is not possible," he said quietly. Tira checked her datapad. "Her vital signs are elevated but stable, Commander. She's conscious and aware. 3.2 times standard gravity. The point where average combat alpha cadets fell." Molly's entire body was shaking now. Her uniform was soaked with sweat. Her face was red with exertion. 3.4. 3-point-6. In the gallery, Goreth stood perfectly still. His small eyes were fixed on the human in the chamber. He had never seen anything like this. He had never imagined anything like this. 3.8 times standard gravity. Molly dropped to one knee. The gallery erupted in noise. Some cadets cheered, thinking the trial was over. Others shouted in surprise. Commander Zareth's hand moved toward the emergency shut-off switch, but Molly was not finished. From her kneeling position, she placed both palms flat on the floor. She took 3 deep breaths, each one a battle against the crushing weight pressing down on her chest. Then she pushed herself back up to her feet. The gallery went silent. Again. Even Commander Zoreth froze with his hand still near the shut-off switch. At 4 times standard gravity. Molly Grant did something that would be discussed at the Academy for decades to come. She dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups. Down, up, down, up. Her arms shook with every movement. Her spine felt like it might snap. Her ribs creaked under the pressure. But she pushed through it. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. In the gallery, Goreth began to laugh. Not mockery, not disbelief. Pure, amazed joy at witnessing the impossible. "She's doing push-ups," someone said, their voice filled with wonder. "At 4 times gravity, she's doing push-ups. 4.2 times standard gravity." Molly stopped her push-ups. Blood was running from her nose where small vessels had burst under the pressure. Her hands were slipping on the floor, wet with her own sweat. She placed her palms flat again and pushed. Her arms screamed in protest. Her shoulders felt like they were being torn apart. She stood up. 4.4 times standard gravity. This was the Academy record. No cadet in 300 years had stood upright at a higher gravity level. Molly's knees buckled. She caught herself, forced herself straight. 4-point-6. She was barely conscious now. Her vision was a tunnel of gray with a bright spot in the center. Her heart was beating fast and irregular. Every breath was agony, but she was still standing. 4.8 times standard gravity. Molly Grant fell. Commander Zoreth slammed his hand down on the emergency shutoff. The gravity dropped instantly to standard level. Medical teams rushed into the chamber, carrying equipment and stretchers. Molly lay on the floor, unable to move. Her body had given everything it had. Her muscles were exhausted beyond recovery. Her ribs were fractured in 3 places. Blood vessels had burst throughout her body, leaving bruises that would take weeks to heal. But she was alive. And she was conscious. The medical team lifted her onto a stretcher. As they carried her toward the exit, she turned her head slightly. Commander Zoreth was standing by the door, his forearms no longer folded, but hanging at his sides in what Molly recognized as shock. "Commander," she said. Her voice was rough and weak, but clear enough to hear. "I would like to request a reclassification." Zoreth looked at her for a long time. The observation gallery above was still silent. Hundreds of beings waiting to hear his response. Then the Calvaxi commander did something that no cadet had ever seen him do. He laughed. 4.8, he said, shaking his head slowly. The record was 4.4. You beat it by nearly half a unit. While doing push-ups. After everyone told you that you would collapse at 3. He looked up at the gallery, at the hundreds of faces staring down. "You heard her request," he announced, his voice carrying through the speakers to every corner of the room. "Cadet Molly Grant has demonstrated combat capability beyond any reasonable doubt. Her classification is changed, effective immediately. Combat Alpha. The gallery exploded with noise. Cheering, shouting, stamping of feet and claws and appendages of every kind. Through the chaos, Molly heard one voice louder than the others. "I owe you a drink, human." Gorath bellowed. "Do not die before I can buy it." Molly smiled as the medical team carried her away. Everything hurt. Everything would hurt for weeks. But none of that mattered. She had done it. She had proven them wrong, and she was just getting started. The medical bay of Station Verath 7 was designed to treat species from across the galaxy. There were beds sized for massive Thoraki. There were chambers filled with liquid for aquatic beings. There were temperature-controlled rooms for species that required extreme heat or cold. Molly Grant lay in a human-sized bed near the center of the bay, her body wrapped in healing patches that delivered medicine directly through her skin. The doctors had told her she would need 2 weeks to fully recover. Her ribs needed time to knit back together. Her muscles needed time to repair. Her blood vessels needed time to heal from the damage the pressure had caused. She did not mind the rest. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she had earned it. Visitors came constantly. Kevin Park was the first. He arrived an hour after she was brought to the medical bay, his eyes red from crying again, though this time the tears were from joy. "You did it," he kept saying. "You actually did it. I didn't believe you could. No one believed you could. But you did it." "I had no choice," Molly said. "I told everyone I would try. I could not let them be right about me." Kevin shook his head in amazement. "The entire academy is talking about you. Everyone. The Kelvaxi cadets are saying you must have been modified somehow, that no natural human could do what you did. The Elvery are saying you have some kind of hidden gift. The Phoenix are already calling you the Gravity Breaker." Molly laughed, then winced as her cracked ribs protested the movement. "I am not modified. I have no hidden gift. I just trained very hard and refused to fall. That's what makes it even more amazing. You did the impossible through pure stubbornness." "Stubbornness is an underrated quality," Molly agreed. Mentor Sadik visited next. The Ovari instructor stood beside her bed with his feathers pressed flat against his body, a sign of deep emotion in his species. "I told you that you would need luck," he said quietly. "I was wrong. You did not need luck. You needed time and determination, and you had both." "I also needed good teaching," Molly replied. "You explained the trial to me honestly. You did not hide the dangers or pretend it would be easy. That honesty helped me prepare." Savik's feathers rose slightly. "You are generous, Cadet Grant. Or should I say Combat Cadet Grant now? The second one sounds better." Savik made a soft sound that Molly had learned was Elvari laughter. "It does indeed. Rest well. The Combat Alpha program is much harder than auxiliary support. You will need all your strength." Gorath came that evening, carrying a container of liquid that he placed carefully on the table beside her bed. "It is Thoraki Victory Ale," he explained. "Very strong. Very bitter. Humans probably should not drink it." Molly looked at the container. "Is this the drink you promised me?" "It is. I said I would buy you a drink if you survived." "You survived. The debt is paid." Molly smiled. "Thank you, Gorath. I will try it when I am healed." The Thoraki stood awkwardly beside her bed for a moment, his massive form seeming somehow smaller than usual. Finally, he spoke again. "I must apologize to you," he said. "On the first day, when I laughed at your classification, I was cruel. I judge you based on your species, not your character. That was wrong." "You were not wrong about my species," Molly said. "Humans are physically weaker than Thoraki. Our bones are lighter. Our muscles are smaller. These are facts. But I was wrong about what those facts meant. I thought weakness of body meant weakness of spirit. You have proven that the two are not connected. Molly considered this. Perhaps that is what makes humans different. We have always been weak compared to the other creatures on our own planet. We have no claws, no armor, no venom. We survive by using our minds and our will. We learn to compensate for our physical limitations. Gorath nodded slowly. Then your species is more dangerous than we realized. A being that can overcome its own nature is a being to be respected or feared. The Thoraki's mouth twisted in that almost smile. That too. Commander Zorath visited on the third day. Molly tried to sit up when he entered, but he waved one of his 4 hands. Stay down. Cadet, you have earned rest. He stood at the foot of her bed, his scales shimmering in the medical bay lights. For a long moment, he said nothing. I have been a military officer for 40 standard years, he finally said. In that time, I have trained thousands of cadets from hundreds of species. I have seen bravery and cowardice, strength and weakness, success and failure in every possible combination. He paused. I have never seen what you did in that chamber. Molly waited for him to continue. 4.8 times standard gravity, Zora said, beating a record that stood for 15 years. Doing exercises at gravity levels that should have rendered you unconscious. Remaining aware and communicating clearly even after your body had failed. He shook his head. I do not understand how it was possible. I trained, Molly said simply. Many cadets train. None of them have done what you did. Molly thought about his question seriously. She wanted to give him an honest answer. Humans are very good at ignoring what our bodies tell us, she said eventually. When our muscles say they cannot continue, we can choose to continue anyway. When our minds say we should give up, we can choose to keep going. Our bodies are weak, but our control over our bodies is strong. Zorath considered this. You are saying that humans can override their own physical limitations through mental effort. Sometimes. Not always. And there are costs. My body will take weeks to heal because I pushed it beyond its design. But in that moment, when I needed to keep standing, I was able to silence the parts of my brain that wanted me to stop. That is a frightening ability. It can be. Many humans have destroyed themselves by pushing too hard. But it can also be useful in the right circumstances. Zorath was quiet for another long moment. Then he reached into a pocket of his uniform and withdrew a small metal chip. This is your original classification chip, he said. I had it retrieved from the system archives. He placed it on the table beside her bed, next to the container of Thoraki ale. Low threat. Auxiliary track. Support services. He read the words without expression. I wrote those words on your file before I ever saw your face. I made a decision about your potential based on statistics and assumptions about your species. I was wrong. Molly looked at the chip. You were following standard procedure. Standard procedure is often wrong about individuals. Zorath straightened to his full height. I am updating the Academy guidelines for human assessment. From now on, humans will be given the same initial evaluation trials as other species before their track is assigned. If more humans have your determination, we should not be wasting them in auxiliary programs. That is very generous, Commander. It is not generosity. It is efficiency. A good military does not waste resources. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Your new classification has been officially entered into the system. Combat Alpha, specialization pending. When you are healed, you will join the advanced training program. Thank you, Commander. Zorath looked back at her. Do not thank me, Cadet Grant. You earned this through your own effort. All I did was recognize what you proved. He left, and Molly was alone again. She picked up her original classification chip and held it in her hand. The metal was cold and light. Such a small thing to have such power over her future. Such a simple decision to have been so wrong. She did not throw it away. She kept it, placing it in her pocket where she could feel its weight. It would serve as a reminder, not of how wrong they had been about her, but of how easy it was to be wrong about anyone. The galaxy was full of beings who had decided what other beings could or could not do. It was full of classifications and assessments and assumptions based on species and size and physical characteristics. Most of those assumptions were probably correct most of the time, but not always. Sometimes, a human from a low-gravity world could stand in 5 times standard gravity through nothing but determination. Sometimes, the small and the weak could surprise everyone by refusing to accept their limits. And sometimes, the threat assessment was just a starting point. Molly closed her eyes and let herself rest. In 2 weeks, she would begin combat alpha training. In 2 weeks, she would have to prove herself all over again, against bigger and stronger opponents who had been training for combat their entire lives. She was looking forward to it. Outside the medical bay, the academy continued its work. Cadets trained and studied and competed. Officers gave orders and made assessments. The great machinery of the galactic military turned as it had turned for 300 years, but something had changed. Something small, perhaps. A single human in a single gravity chamber, refusing to fall, Dodd. It was not much. It was not a revolution or a transformation or a great shift in galactic history. But it was a beginning, Dodd, and sometimes that was enough.